What is up, everybody? Everyday Angler here. So today I'm kicking off the fly tying series I'm going to be doing. It's late fall, high of like 55 for the foreseeable future. So pretty much hunkering down, going to do a lot less fishing, and wanted to start doing some fly tying videos. So this is my first video in a panfish fly tying series. So I've already got a bunch of my patterns that I want to do. I'm also going to do other people's patterns in this series, just so then I can have a collection on my channel of panfish flies. So of course, panfish flies, red breast, green sunfish, rock bass, bluegill, pumpkin seed, long ear, all of the panfish that you can catch, shell crackers, crappie. This fly was tied more for the purpose of how I fish it than it being a crayfish pattern. I like to swing this thing casting into the riffles and just let it swing into the deeper pools. So it's not really like the bottom bouncing type of traditional crayfish pattern that you think about. I like to tie probably the smallest I'll go for panfish is like a 12 if it's a nymph. Most of the time I'm fishing size 8, size 10. Most of the time I'm fishing floating line, so these flies, a lot of these flies are going to be weighted. I mean, you're not going to fish sinking line. I mean, you can, but I don't think a lot of people are going to fish sinking lines for panfish, right? Like I said, that's enough talking. We're going to be tying the mini mud bug, one of my favorite panfish flies. So let's get started. Alright, so this is the mini mud bug. I also tie it in a, this is probably one of my favorite colors. This olive, I'll put it in the vise. This olive and blue combo. As you can see, it's kind of like a take on the traditional just conehead type woolly bugger. I just kept changing it and changing it and doing it in craw colors. So this fly isn't gonna ride hook point up, but like I said, this is more of like a swinging. That's what I tied it for. Or maybe these long, slow drifts in these warm water creeks. I'll just cast it out. It's just brass on it, so it slowly sinks, and whenever I feel it touch the bottom, I just give it a twitch and lift it back up. And I'll probably do a video on how I like to fish this fly when it gets warmer. But let's get to it. We're going to tie the red one today, so we're going to tie this one. I like to tie these on a Daichi 1760. Daichi. These are the curved hooks. I just like the curve. It gives the... I know it doesn't ride like truly hook point up, but when I tie them on these little curved hooks, it almost feels like, because the eye is pointing down, the weight's gonna be down here. It might ride like that, right? Let me zoom in a little bit for you, and it'd be a lot easier to see this fly. Okay, so weight for the fly. I buy these wholesale fly company Coneheads. Brass, this is like a hot orange color, 4.8 millimeter. Put that on there. And behind the Conehead, I'm gonna put a 3.8 millimeter brass bead. Any color you want. This bead is not gonna show up on the fly. Just like that. So the reason I like that bead back there is because I'm going to run my thread up against that bead, and it's going to make that cone head just fit perfectly. You know, not crooked or anything, because it's just the perfect bead, a perfect circle sitting behind this cone head, so it's not going to go on all crooked or anything. I'm using 140 Veevus. You can definitely go lighter. This is just kind of the thread I use for everything. This is in a brown. And I'm just building up a thread dam behind that bead. And I'm gonna run my thread back about to the barb of the hook. You can see that. Cut my excess off. Okay, so I'm not really too picky about the materials, especially on these panfish flies, but this is probably the best Marabou I've used on this fly, and I will go looking for this specific Marabou just for this fly, because this is mini MFC's mini barred Marabou. in a burnt orange and barred with black. The mini Marabou is just like, when you're doing these shorter tails on these smaller flies, it's just like a much fuller feather, if that makes any sense to you, right? When you get your regular blood quill Marabou, like this is kind of on the bigger size. When you get a tail out of it though, it's a very thick, bushy tail. So I'm actually going to tie this whole feather in, because I'm actually going to twist this feather and palmer it for the body of this fly. I'm just going to do a hook shank length right where I stopped my thread, maybe 2, just to secure this feather, 2 wraps right on top of that feather. I'm going to pull this feather back and give it a couple wraps right in front of it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this artistic wire. You can use UTC definitely. This is just some stuff I got at the craft store. I know some people are going to want to know how thick it is and all that, so 26 gauge artistic wire from the craft store. This one is in gold. I used to tie it in first and then put that Marabou on top, but it kind of pulls my Marabou when I go to twist the wire on there. And I'm laying it on so my wire is actually going to push against that bead right there, keeping that bead in place, helping out with this thread dam in front of that bead. Alright, I'm gonna make sure that's all secure. Let me turn my phone off. So I'm going to run my thread back up to about right before this thread dam I built. You gotta throw a quick half hitch in there. And this is my favorite stuff to use, Sally Hansen's. I'm going to Sally Hansen. Not too much. Just a little bit. Just right there. Okay, I'm going to grab this Marabou and start twisting it. And we're not worried about it being too buggy or anything. Once I twist it, I'm going to start wrapping it up my hook shank. And remember, we are tying in a pretty thick Marabou stem, so if anything, take like one less wrap than you think you'll need. I'm going to tie it down with this 140, just like that. A few thread wraps on the front of this thing. We can pull some of these longer fibers out. Some of these guys that are sticking out too far. Alright, now I got my wire, and I'm actually going to wrap this the same way I wrapped that Marabou. Just trying to make sure I'm getting some part of that wire on the stem of the Marabou. Right there is good. And just like any wire, this artistic wire will twist right off. Just like that. So before we go any farther, I'd like to take my little Stonefo Velcro brush here and really bug out this Marabou. So we've got a nice full tail, and it's all we've used is Marabou so far and wire, and you get this really thick boogie body on this fly. Next, no panfish fly is done without some silly legs. You can use whichever ones you would want. The only thing I'll say is you want to use these flat crazy legs, because if you use the round rubber legs, they look great, but they'll take up a lot of bulk on here when you tie them on. So, and these are just orange barred, a little bit lighter orange than the fly itself. I'm going to take 2 strands on each side of the fly. 1 strand or 2 strands directly on this side. I'm just going to tie that in. I'm tying onto the thread dam now that I built for that bead. And I'm gonna use my vise here and put 2 directly on the opposite side. Almost like if you're just doing like a hopper or something, the same way you lay these legs over. Okay, so now I'm gonna grab these legs that are sticking in front of my fly, and I'm gonna lay them back over and tie those in as well. Really just, the only thing I'm being careful about is making sure these legs, I want them on either side. I don't want them all over, right? Okay, so we've actually got 4 legs on each side of this fly, so this, it might be a little overkill, but I like silly legs. Now we're gonna grab these silly legs, and we're not gonna pull them, we're just gonna bring them back here, because if you pull them, you'll cut them too short. So I'm making sure there's no tension on these silly legs. I'm gonna cut them a little bit, like barely, you can barely tell how much shorter this is from the tail of this fly. Just like that. Look at that craziness. Okay. So yeah, we're pretty much almost done. The only thing now is we're gonna do a dubbing loop, which there's plenty of videos if you don't know how to make one. But you should know how to make one. Dubbing loops, like you're gonna notice in this Panfish series, I use dubbing loops like too much. They're just so easy though to build a nice head, especially behind a cone. And you're gonna see why I like to use this 140 too. So I've got my dubbing loop. I'm gonna put my loon tool, just let that sit there for a second. And the collar of this fly is gonna be done with Senyos Fusion Dub in the Tabaco color. And I'm gonna get a healthy clump of this relative to the fly, and I'm gonna start picking it apart and putting it back over each other. And I'm not worried about this. I mean, if anything, I'm gonna be upset if it comes out too thin, because I really want this to be buggy. So we've taken a pretty good clump, you can see right here. I know the camera doesn't want to focus on it. I'm gonna put this inside my dubbing loop. I like to split them 50-50. I'm just gonna give this a good spin. Now the tricky, you see what just happened there? Don't let your silly legs get trapped in there. I have one of these things that I use for bigger streamers, but yeah, it's not gonna help me. Just try your best not to trap silly legs in there. So I've got this nice noodle here now, and what I'm gonna do is come in with the same Velcro brush, kind of brush this stuff out. It's okay if we lose some of them, but if you start losing too many, it's just that your dubbing loop isn't tight enough, so give it some more spins. Alright, so we got a nice healthy loop right here. And what I'm gonna do is, before I apply this stuff, or I wrap it around here, I'm gonna put a little bit of Sally Hansen's right here. Okay, so I'm gonna start taking my dubbing loop with all this Senyos Fusion Dub. I'm gonna start wrapping it up to my cone head. I'm making touching wraps, and I'm palmering this stuff back because I don't want to trap too many of these fibers. There we go. That's a nice collar to this fly. And now I'm gonna trap that dubbing loop with my thread. This is why I like using the 140 right here, because I mean, you can use 6/0 Veevus too. That's a strong thread, because I'm literally like tucking this thread in behind that cone head. You're not gonna see any of this thread when I finish the fly. Alright, once you got your dubbing loop secure, you can cut it off. And now, the way I like to finish this fly is some more Sally Hansen's, believe it or not. With my thread, I'm just gonna coat my thread a little bit with the Sally Hansen's. This stuff is like super thin. And I'm gonna just make a few wraps. So that's all glued back there. I'm gonna throw a half hitch in there. Make sure that's nice and tight. I'm gonna cut it off. So because that Sally Hansen's, I mean the half hitch is I wouldn't do it if I didn't have any Sally Hansen's back there. I'd do a whip finish, but I'm honestly not great at doing whip finishes. I just always done half hitches like that. Now I'm just taking my brush and that collar really does veil almost like the whole fly. And it's a little bit of flash. It's just super, I mean it's an easy fly to tie, it really is. And this has caught me, those of you that have seen my channel, that have been watching my channel for a while know that this thing has caught me a lot more than just panfish. So there it is. So essentially this fly is going to be cast out. It kind of has that crayfishy profile. I like all the different oranges we have in there. And of course you can do the exact same thing, just change your colors up. I mean you can tie this thing pink, purple, on size 4s, you know, for bigger fish, or just black on black, black and purple, chartreuse and purple. Chartreuse and black is a really good color too. But there you go, the mini mud bug. Thanks for watching everybody. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below, let me know if you want to see more, because I'm really excited to do this panfish fly tying series for y'all. So I'll catch you guys next time on another episode of The Everyday Angler.